everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. No matter where you are, we are so glad that you are here joining us for our virtual roundtable on performance and site reliability. We're excited to be here today to talk about the latest trends and best practices around this critical piece of managing software. My name's Jesse. I've been working in the tech industry since the 90s, working on the Java programming language, and I'm currently serving as the chief technologist here at DZone. But I got my start, just like many of you, working as a developer and architect through the early 2000s. Back then, performance was mostly on-premise, focused on monolithic applications that ran on local machines or even in a client-server architecture. As we'll see today, that's drastically different from today's mega-scale microservice SaaS applications running in the cloud. We've just released our latest trend report on performance and site reliability. You can download that on DZone.com. This is the perfect place to go and get updates on the latest best practices, products, architecture, and tech trends. DZone.com is trusted by millions of developers and technical leaders all over the world every single month to keep them up to date on what's going on in the tech industry. I'm excited to get started, but if you'd like to send this to a friend or watch other events like this, just go to dzone.com/webinars to see all of our on-demand events. I'm excited to introduce our panel as we get started. First of all, Paige, where's Paige? Wave, hey Paige.
Right here, hello.
Senior Developer Advocate at Chronosphere, also one of our sponsors. Thanks so much for being here. Andreas, wave. Vice President of Products at Stack State, also a sponsor. Thank you so much, great to have you on. Lance Erickson, there's Lance, wave. Software Engineering Manager at Telemetry by Scout APM, also a sponsor, thank you. Boris, up here, hey Boris. Joining us from overseas, software and a cloud architect at NordCloud. And you wrote the article on distributed systems observability, and we'll get into that here in just a little bit. So thank you for that. Joanna, there you are. Hey, Joanna. Performance engineer at Postman, one of my favorite tools. Sorry, shameless plug. And you wrote the piece on performance engineering powered by machine learning, I think. So a really cool article. Thank you. And Alariza, wave, DevOps architect at SmartWire, who wrote one of my favorite pieces on blameless postmortem culture. Huge, huge topic. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But thank you all for being here. It's so good to see you all. I want to kick off with a question for Andreas. Love your background, by the way. In our survey, we asked developers the following question. At your organization, which of the following functions holds the majority of responsibility for monitoring performance? Now, according to those responses we got back, 46% said that the responsibility for performance is divided equally between development and operations. Now, this number is up from 34% in our 2021 survey, so a big jump. You know, what do you think is attributed to this shift in responsibility being more evenly distributed?
Good question. And what we see happening within our customer domain is that many DevOps teams or developers and operations guys start to understand the importance of monitoring, but more important, start to understand the importance of observability. And with the practice of maturity growing, the observability maturity growing, we see more and more tools coming in that can be super easily integrated into your entire DevOps pipeline, into your entire Kubernetes landscape. And we feel that the ease of using it is lowering the burden for the developers to start adopting it. That's one. The other one, what we see, but I'm lacking real data, is the move and the rise of open telemetry, where developers become more aware of augmenting their applications. And hence, right, when they become more aware, they will also most likely say, hey, this is important, and I do take responsibility for that.
Awesome. And Alariza, yeah, I'd love to get your input on that too. I mean, being a DevOps architect, this feels like it's part of that whole shift left thing that's been going on, but I'm not sure if you agree or disagree, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Well, I'm maybe one of those DevOps, advocates that from the beginning, I had a different opinion about the DevOps, which is completely in line with what Andreas said. So I think when DevOps started to happen in most of the companies, they started getting swamped with just making things automated, almost everything. And at some point, I think many companies missed the whole picture, that the whole aim of DevOps was get things together, especially bringing the new culture in the company that people started working together. And when you look at this kind of, I mean, topics like the observability or performance monitoring or anything, related to the operations, the developers are not really excluded. They are part of it, because what is happening in the production environment, it's coming from the development side. And I think since we started adding developer to these activities, we get a better picture of what is happening. And also they also get a better picture of how their code is running on the production, what is the server their code is running, how the infrastructure is created. I think with this collaboration, we can definitely create a better services, infrastructure, everything. And this continuously, I think, collaboration helps to have a more reliable services for customers.
That's a great point. And I know, many years ago, it was when you had all the developers just kind of throwing things over. And it's interesting. There was just a report released last year by Atlassian, right, based on Jira and all the tools that they write, called "If You Build It, You Run It." Right? If you build it, you're going to run it now. So that whole shift left thing, where developers now responsible for monitoring performance, right? Not just monitoring, but observability, and we'll get into that in a minute, what the difference is. But does anybody's organization still have that hard line between the developers and the other side, or is everybody starting to see the whole shift? I can only think of one or two companies that I know friends at nowadays that have that hard line. So everybody's getting in the shift, right?
Well, if I can comment on that, what I do see is a new hard line. So exactly to your point, development and operations have come together, but now all of a sudden we see the rise of platform teams. And I honestly think that is a good development, because we're asking quite a lot of capabilities from the DevOps teams, the shift left of testing, the shift left of security, the shift left of observability. And now you need to maintain an entire Kubernetes platform. So for me, the platform teams are a kind of a new way and a new shape of the former infrastructure and operations department, but one really, really big difference. And that is the extreme standardization on Kubernetes, where everything that you do and push towards that is really automated compared to the past. But making a new silo, I certainly see that happening, and probably for an obvious reason, because complexity is going through the roof for many DevOps teams.
All right, Joanne, I got it. You smiled, laughed, unmute. You've definitely got a thought here. I want to hear it. And Paige, you're next.
I was at an event like 2 weeks ago, and actually that was the question: are platform teams the new SRE or DevOps teams? And I think that the shift left of all those things has created a burden in the development teams, because in most companies it hasn't been done properly. It is following the trend. So instead of creating automated processes and standards that the development teams can use, it's like, you do the testing now, you build the pipelines now. So it's not a fair way of doing it. And in many cases, platforms team become these tyrants that enforce rules and create templates, and the developers become code monkeys that have to use all of these things that they don't understand what is doing, but they have to use it anyway. So I'm not generalizing. I just think that in many cases that's done because of the pressure of the shift left. But I think, like Andreas was saying, it's very complex, and there has to be a way to abstract certain processes from the teams. But I think we are yet to find the balance between both.
All right, Paige.
Yeah, I think there's been some really great thoughts so far. And my take on it is, we don't have so much of a hard line these days as a blurred line. I think I saw a lot of ops teams and SREs really up-level their skills as we all moved to the cloud, moved to containers, but we left, in my opinion, the developers behind. I totally agree with you, build it, you run it. You should know how your service is operating in prod if you're a developer. But in the last 3 years, we've expected devs to get up to speed on all the configuration required to run an app in Kubernetes, let alone, are you making Helm charts? Do you know how to debug Go templating? I do think that we've got a responsibility to enable our developers more not in tooling, but in kind of training and knowledge. What is just enough Kubernetes to know so that we can have developers feel confident running these services that are pretty complicated these days.
Completely agree. And listen, spoken like a true developer advocate. I mean, that was advocating if ever there was one. From my point of view, right, as a developer, when that stuff starts shifting, it's hard. It's complicated things that they have to learn, and that training is a big piece of it. So I love it. And let's see, Andreas, you've spoken a little bit. Lance, you're managing teams. You seeing this with your developers? What do you think?
Yeah, I've seen it a little bit in a couple of different organizations, and I think the key word is collaboration, as opposed to just sharing. Because if you just start sharing the burden of monitoring and observability, then the people who have been sitting with monitoring tools for the past 5 or 8 years have some strong opinions and some advantages in knowledge. And I think we need to get beyond the sharing and make sure that sort of the SRE teams, or if you have a team that's called the DevOps team, they are actually working and providing devs the opportunity to get up to speed, both with knowledge and with tooling. So I think collaboration versus sharing is where I see a big need still looming. But that's always a struggle, right? We're always trying to work across disciplines like that and improve things. So
that's fair. All right, Boris, the next question is for you. This year, we've noticed that the topic of observability is trending up on DZone.com. I promised y'all we'd get to observability. It's been trending up, developers talking about observability, best practices. In our research for this trend report, we decided to add some observability related questions. The first was, does your organization currently use any observability tools? A whopping 83% of respondents have either adopted an observability tool or are currently considering it. Is this number surprising? Is 83% surprising to you? What do you think?
Well, to be honest, it's not really surprising, because I think almost all companies using some observability or a monitoring platform, and which is the most interesting part here, that almost nobody can describe what's the difference between monitoring and observability. So, and when I try to research a bit and find what a Google saying, what Google Cloud and Microsoft and other companies, they all have a different description. What is observability? How it differentiate between monitoring, and basically this is almost the same stuff. So monitoring and observability, one tool. So it's said that, it's actually not observability. Observability is only based on artificial intelligence engine. So yeah, it's only this, and only our company provides this observability platform, the proper observability, not. So that's quite. But what I can say from our company and our customers, that almost everyone using the platform like observability or monitoring. So, and then in my research, in my opinion, this is the mostly for marketing purposes. So.
Can I comment on that?
Because awesome. Please, Andreas, jump in there. Yes,
I have a slightly different opinion. So I do think if you ask the majority of the companies, do you practice observability? The answer is a firm yes. Most of the companies have some form of observability, metrics, traces, logs to ingest and to do something with it. If you would ask all the teams in that particular company, the answer would definitely be a no, because what we see is that, yes, a company as a whole definitely has islands of innovation where observability is in place, where most likely the mobile teams, the internet teams, they go really fast because they need that to optimize performance and whatnot. But if you go a bit more to the business side of the house and the internal stuff, there's a little bit of monitoring, and probably for a good reason. Why would you optimize, right? If your applications are stable and not uniquely distinguishing you from competition, and performance, yeah, is important, but not as that important. So I would say there's a little bit of a nuance. The question to me is, if you grow your practice, whether or not you call it monitoring or observability, different questions start to arise, right? And we'll go more into the MTTR type of questions. And then you need more data than just a kind of a traffic light monitoring type of function. Is it working, yes or no, versus why is it not working? And can I dive deeper? So I do see a market maturing, but I'm super curious to the others is, do you guys see only that kind of more grown-up type of observability also in islands of innovation, or do you see companies which have that widespread as well already, that maturity?
I think the question is it's how different people in different roles can understand what is observability and monitoring. For developers, they can say, oh, we have a simple login in our Java or a C# project. No, we have observability, and the cloud architect or solution architect said, no, we just have a login, we just have a monitoring, and solution other architects or other DevOps teams said, no, we don't have it. So, and also it depends on what platform are you using. So you have enterprise level or just a simple mobile application. So
and a lot of companies that I run into, Andreas, to your point, are using something in between, right? I'm not sure I agree. And I want Joanna to answer because she's our machine learning expert on the call, but I'm not sure that I would say that observability is only machine learning or AI, right? Definitely not AI, because people misuse that word all the time. Tech people get it. But the thing that gets me is, I'm used to the monolithic applications, monitoring performance, wire traces, databases, easy monitor stuff, but that doesn't work when it blows up at scale. And to your point, it's not as specific. So you've got monitoring, then we don't talk a lot about it now. It was hot 15 years ago, instrumentation, where you build some of that additional stuff inside your runtime libraries. And now we get to observability. So, great questions, great insights. Joanna, question for you on the back of that. I'm dying to know. Anybody can jump in there too. Alreza would like your opinion as a DevOps guy. Do you think it's only observability if there's machine learning involved?
Essentially, observability is being able to ask questions to your system and then get the answers based on the signals that you get. Not those 3 pillars things. Hopefully, we will someday stop finding the 3 pillars, because who wants to build a house on 3 pillars anyway? But it's not, especially because of something Andreas said as well. Like we have this shift left of observability. We want development teams to have observability when they are developing, and that's expensive. So you want cheaper systems using OpenTelemetry, for example, Prometheus, Jaeger, things like that. So if you have to back that up with some form of machine learning or AI, that becomes expensive pretty quickly. Sure. So there are all forms of observability and all levels of maturity as well. So I think that's the question. It's what's your level of maturity, and what are you trying to get from what you're building?
Yes, yeah. Paige gave you a +1.
100%. I like to reframe the question as, how observable is your system? You're already on the scale. It's not, did you buy observability? Do you have a central observability team? But for the system and the people and processes you've got, how quickly can you answer these questions? Like, why did the logging bill go up? Some of those fun investigations we've got on the SRE side.
My AWS costs are out of control because the developers didn't tear down. Never mind. So speaking of that, jump over to Lance a little bit. Thinking through software projects, and some of the things that we use observability and / or monitoring for is performance, right? We want fast applications. You can't sit around and click on something. This is not Netscape days. We're not going to wait for those types of things. So, Lance, as you're managing these people and working on these things, we asked our respondents to recall software projects that they've worked on and rank the top factors for poor performance, right? Here are the things that they blamed the most. One is database misconfiguration. 2, bad code that somebody else wrote. And even the advocate shaking her head. And number 3, insufficient memory. I do not have enough memory to do battle with this code. So as you think of these top 3 factors for poor performance, working with your teams, does your perspective align with these top 3 things? Do you see something else that you'd put in the top besides database misconfiguration, somebody else's poorly written code, or this machine that I've been given that doesn't have enough memory?
I feel like the bad code grab bag there just covers so much space that it's perfect. Like it can encapsulate database misconfiguration or insufficient memory because somebody wrote an inefficient program that should have been streaming and it wasn't. And I don't know. I do think that these are some pretty common challenges. It's interesting. I feel like insufficient memory is an interesting one to see after sort of seeing the adoption of Kubernetes, because it becomes a different kind of problem in that environment, right? It has different ways of manifesting. I would almost say Kubernetes misconfiguration is like something that maybe should be in the top there, because I feel like there is a huge space of traps that you can fall into. But I mean, database problems are never going to go away. It's always going to be a bottleneck at some point, right? So I think that's easy to keep there. I feel like these are reasonably representative. I think I haven't thought about memory in the same way since sort of containers and Kubernetes came around.
Yeah,
but
it makes it almost a non-topic sometimes when we think about it.
Well, yeah, but now my pods just get killed and I have to say, oh, I've been killed again. Like, please, can I have more memory? Or but
or my AWS
no,
bill is extravagantly high. One of the two, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting for me. My son, my oldest son, he is now getting ready to graduate college and he's going into coding as well. Working with my old team, and he's getting ready. He's been working on the, data analytics side, and he's getting ready to move over and do a stint in DevOps before he moves to a sprint team. So Alireza, this one's kind of targeted your way in between you and Lance. But as you get into that, what recommendations do you have? Because we've got a lot of developers that are going to be watching this thing that are brand new to coding. It's amazing to me to look at the world of coding through their eyes because they have so little experience. And with all the experience we have on the call, what are some of the things that you would recommend for these developers to keep in mind to avoid poor performance in the applications as they're thinking through the development path? And Alireza, you can go first as the DevOps guy in the room. This is your shot. Push that stuff as far left as you want. Reach these young minds.
There were a couple of things I wanted to say maybe before moving to that topic you said now.
Sure.
About the observability, because I think that was a really interesting topic. Maybe we went too quickly for that. Basically, in the past, we were used to see the only logs out of the applications, and the developers supposed to log everything because that was the best way of understanding what is happening. But since we get into the more complicated system, as we call it actually a system, not application anymore, we mean by system is a complicated, a structure that contains a lot of components. So now having some logs is not enough anymore because the logs only shows us what's happening with that particular component. But what is happening now is that now we are creating lots of infrastructure on cloud. They are running in different places, different regions. They're communicating with each other completely differently, sometimes on the internet, sometimes internally in a private connection. So it's so complicated. We even don't know the traffic is coming to the website. Where is the source sometimes? without looking into the, the proper, the logs and monitoring. That's why, the monitoring solutions kind of evolved in the last 2 decades. And maybe that's the reason we call them observability, because they're offering something more. And I think this is a kind of a way in the IT industry that we are not only good at inventing new features in the software, we are constantly inventing the titles. And if you ask me if you're looking for the job on LinkedIn, it's quite a mess, because we have a platform engineering, we have a cloud engineering, we have a DevOps engineer, we have a SRE engineers.
Cloud enabler.
Yeah, I also know a company in Netherlands, they call this role as a mission critical engineer, and they have more than 150 engineers, and they are really proud of what they are doing, which is really good. But the problem is that we never generalize things. And that's why Joanna also said she doesn't want to generalize. And this is one of the issues we have, because we don't have a generic definition for things. And that's quite a difficult thing for us when we want to describe things to each other. And that's why from one company to other company, the thing's completely different. You can't imagine, since COVID-19 started, because I lost my job, I had to move between 5 companies. And this was a kind of a nightmare for me. Every time I started my role, I have to define everything about the DevOps from scratch. And in every company, the story was quite different. And most of the time, they would consider me as someone who is really good in scripting and automate everything. And I was just trying to tell them, hey, it's not true. I'm not that person. That was not a reason I became a DevOps engineer, because basically, before I become a DevOps engineer, I was software engineer for 15 years. So I was coding every day. I was creating software, API, everything.
So I did a state of developer paper webinar last year. We're no longer in a place where software is just convenient for us. Software was convenient, back in the 70s and the 80s. It started to become productivity based, right? We could get more done in the 90s, started getting into the 2000s. Software is now critical. It runs huge systems. And one of the slides I put up had a bunch of things that where poor software was released, it resulted in deaths of humans. All right, that's a real thing. That's the world that we're moving into, which is why some of this stuff is so important that we can solve. So, last question for everybody. I want to go around, and Boris, I know you're cut on time, so I'm going to make sure that you get to get in there first. But as you think about, as Alireza said, this whole, the whole structure of engineering software, right? And the term engineering is very specific. So if you're in North Carolina, at least, for you to say you're an engineer, you have to have a professional engineering and pass certificates and boards and things like that to be able to get a stamp to actually look at engineering documents. And we don't do that in software. So it's interesting that, for the monitoring and the observability, and we talked a little bit about site reliability, SREs, how all of that comes together. It's really important for us to think about what would cause this performance and site reliability to be successful in your company or in anybody's company, right? And Andreas, if you will, start us off, like, what are your recommendations to set these companies up for success? Part of the 83% that you said say yes until you ask the developers who will tell you no. What is your advice to get them started? And then what's the evolution of this modern performance and site reliability practices? Where do you think we're going next? Yeah. So a little bit of advice and where we're going next. And, we'll ask everybody to be quick, and we'll hit everybody as we go out.
So I really like what we just heard about learning. And if you take a look at the reasons in the report, I would definitely recommend to download. You see actually 17 different main reasons for performance degradation. The interesting part is, if you scroll to the list, some information would come from logs. Others would come from just regular metrics that you collect. Others would come from eBPF trace type of data. So already understanding that if you observe and if you develop, that you need already a multitude to truly understand the different angles of your piece of software to truly observe it. That would be my tip. Dive into that. Have a conversation with your ops engineer, your platform engineer, your DevOps engineer. Nice. Just take the different perspectives and see how you can build that holistic, complete picture.
Perfect. Thank you. Paige, same question.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I have two things. One, I saw in the report someone had described SRE as superhuman meets engineer, and I would say yes, and that is a really fatiguing role. Like Alazira, when I have gone to companies as an SRE, you're starting basically from scratch. You're like, what do you think DevOps is? Here's what I think it is. Here's how it should exist in our company with our specific people and our specific tech stack and skill set. So I would say, one, yes, cherish your SREs, but don't expect the world of them. They are just humans, even if they've got lots of lovely knowledge. And then as far as making an SRE practice successful, I think the best thing I've seen is fostering a spirit of collaboration through communities of practice. Whether you get together once a week to investigate a production alert that went off, to show people your debugging process, or going over other companies' post incident reviews together to glean learnings. Anytime you bring people together to talk, you're going to get learnings. And I think the system will be more reliable overall over time.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you. All right, Boris, what do you think?
So first of all, come to your first question: who's the engineer? So basically, this the person who can solve the complex problems with the simple solution. So it's just a normal. And also regarding the what actually can solve this observability, insight, reliability, and other stuff. So yeah, if, as I said, if you have a complex enterprise level solution, for example, as we have in our company, so many customers comes and ask what you can provide to us, and what actually means that reliability and all this stuff is a monitoring. So and a lot of people actually don't know how to start exactly the conversation from this topic. And yeah, first of all, we need to define the direct plan and patterns with what includes inside reliability and login and other for example, observing the stack and other stuff. So yeah, this is the a few simple things that we need to include in our observability platform. And then it comes tooling question. So it's a minor things, I think.
Great. All right, Joanna.
I think in one of the issues I've started performance engineering, the performance engineering area in a couple of companies, and I think one of the issues for performance engineering as well as site reliability practices is we start from a utopia, like the perfect state instead of trying to build up and not starting by trying to apply the best practices to use the latest patterns, but by talking to the development teams, understanding what are the real problems that they are facing, and doing and working with them, trying to communicate, not just building tooling and standards that then are not practical at all, are not usable, and in the end are a detractor for the teams instead of being what it should be, everything to work together. I think, like Paige said, communication between teams is super important, and usually it's one of the biggest issues because there are so many communication silos that things don't work for the company as the company is, but how the teams want the company to be. And another thing I think works really well is solving issues in an iterative way. So starting by one problem and going and going instead of trying to tackle everything at once and then leading to massive frustration. Because those new areas sometimes are actually new for many people. Like people don't know, like now we have like SREs and what is that? And now we have DevOps. Okay, so DevOps is many things for many people. So actually starting by that part as well, the learning and trying to understand for my company. And I totally agree there should be a standard for using these terms, but in this company, SREs do this, and this area should be used to build this, and trying to find that definition, that global definition for the company. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that sometimes fails and gets.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Lance, wrap us up. Your number one recommendation as people are getting started on this.
Number one, yeah, I think it follows some of the others, which is start small. Don't feel like you have to boil the whole ocean and instrument everything. I mean, in terms of getting started with observability specifically, like I think we've just heard a lot of great arguments for OpenTelemetry and why that might want to be the first place that you start to look, because it is a standard. In fact, it's magical, and it is portable, and it is vendor agnostic. And I think starting small and finding champions on various teams that are interested in this kind of work and interested in seeing their applications get instrumented and the value that you get from that. I think the first time you can get a developer to like write a custom span that has some custom attributes that are like critical to your business and your business information, and see a distributed trace with those attributes and be able to sort of explore the things that you care about in across all of your microservices, probably, which is where you're doing this. I don't know. I think that's how to do it. Start small, start with something portable and ideally open sourced and an open standard. Perfect. And work it in.
What great advice for those getting started and or working to build and improve your performance and site reliability function at your company. Thanks again to all of you panelists, experts in the industry, for giving us a great summary of the current state of performance and site reliability. Thanks again to our sponsors, Chronosphere, Stack State, and Telemetry Hub, and to our authors, Boris, Joanna, and Alireza, for your contributions to this trend report. You can download our trend report again at dzone.com. And if you're interested in sharing this webinar, you can view that and all of our on-demand events at dzone.com/webinars right here. Now, if you would, please stay on the line for just a minute and help us continue to improve by filling out a quick survey. Thanks.